I arrived at my daughter Sarah's house after 10 years working overseas as a petroleum engineer. I walked through the unlocked front door to surprise her carrying gifts from Dubai. Instead of finding my successful lawyer daughter, I saw her on her knees, scrubbing marble floors wearing a stained apron labeled Hamilton Family Maid. Purple bruises visible on her arms. A woman's voice shouted from upstairs, "Sarah, you worthless creature, my coffee better be ready." I froze. My daughter didn't notice me yet. My heart stopped in that moment. Every instinct screamed at me to rush forward to grab my daughter and demand explanations. But something held me back. Maybe it was the decade of negotiations in Middle Eastern oil fields that taught me patience. Or maybe it was the calculating look in my daughter's eyes as she whispered, "Coming, Mrs. Hamilton," that told me there was more to this story than what appeared on the surface. I stepped back silently through the door I had just entered, my mind reeling. This was Sarah's house, the one her mother Eleanor and I had paid off completely before Eleanor passed. This was supposed to be Sarah's sanctuary, her inheritance, her security. Yet here she was serving someone in her own home while wearing the uniform of a servant. The gifts from Dubai suddenly felt like lead in my hands. 10 years. I had been gone 10 years, believing I was doing the right thing. After Eleanor died from cancer, I couldn't bear to stay in Portland. Every corner reminded me of her. When Ara Petro offered me a senior engineering position in their Dubai operations at 3 times my American salary, I thought I was being smart. Sarah had just married Robert Hamilton, that charming investment banker, with the Harvard MBA and the perfect smile. She had her law degree, her mother's house, and what seemed like a bright future. I left believing I was giving her space to build her own life, while I rebuilt mine. Now standing in the driveway of what used to be my daughter's pride and joy, I forced myself to think strategically. Barging in with accusations would accomplish nothing. I needed information. I needed to understand how my accomplished daughter had become a servant in her own home. I drove to the Marriott downtown and checked in under my name, Stanley Morrison. The desk clerk didn't recognize me, which wasn't surprising after a decade away. Portland had changed, but not as much as my daughter's life apparently. From my 12th floor room, I made a call I never thought I'd make. "Jacobson Investigations," the voice answered. "This is Stanley Morrison. I need a complete workup on Robert Hamilton and his family. Start with the last 10 years and work backward." Tom Jacobson had been a client back when I consulted for Portland General Electric. We'd stayed in touch sporadically, and I knew he'd gone into private investigation after retiring from the police force. If anyone could uncover what had happened to Sarah, it would be Tom. "Stanley, I thought you were in Dubai. What's this about?" "I'm back, and something's very wrong with my daughter's situation. I need everything you can find on her husband and whoever Patricia Hamilton is." Patricia Hamilton. That name rings a bell. Give me 48 hours. But I couldn't wait 48 hours, doing nothing. The next morning, I positioned myself at the coffee shop across from Sarah's house at 6 in the morning. What I saw made my blood run cold. Sarah emerged from the house wearing a different uniform, this one for Sunshine Cleaning Services. She walked to the bus stop, her movements careful, and measured like someone trying not to aggravate existing injuries. I followed the bus in my rental car, watching as she got off at a downtown office building. Through the lobby windows, I could see her join a crew of cleaners, pushing a heavy cart full of supplies. My daughter, who graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern Law, was cleaning offices. By 8:15, she was back at her house. I watched from my car as she changed into that degrading Hamilton Family Maid apron and began serving breakfast on the patio. Robert sat there reading his tablet while a woman I assumed was Patricia Hamilton criticized the temperature of the eggs. Neither of them lifted a finger to help as Sarah cleared plates, refilled coffee, and apologized for imagined infractions. Tom Jacobson called that afternoon with preliminary findings that made my stomach churn. Robert's investment firm, Hamilton Capital Partners, had collapsed 5 years ago in a spectacular fraud investigation. While Robert himself avoided prosecution, claiming ignorance of his partner's embezzlement, the firm's closure left him professionally radioactive. He hadn't held a real job since. "It gets worse," Tom continued. "I pulled property records. The house is still in Sarah's name, but Robert was added to the deed 6 years ago. And there's a power of attorney document from 4 years ago, giving Robert full control over Sarah's financial decisions." "Why would she sign that?" "Hospital records from that same time show Sarah was treated for severe depression following a miscarriage. The timing suggests she signed during a vulnerable period." My hand tightened on the phone. Eleanor and I had lost 2 pregnancies before Sarah was born. I knew that particular pain intimately. To think of someone exploiting that vulnerability made my vision blur with rage. "There's more," Tom said quietly. "I spoke with contacts at Preston Marlowe and Associates where Sarah worked. She was on partner track until 3 years ago, when she started showing up with frequent injuries. Black eyes, bruised arms, split lips. She claimed they were from accidents, but HR documented everything. When they tried to intervene, she resigned. No one's heard from her professionally since." I ended the call and sat in my hotel room staring at the Portland skyline. My brilliant daughter hadn't just fallen on hard times. She was being systematically destroyed by the man I'd trusted to care for her. And I'd been 7,000 miles away sending birthday cards and Christmas presents believing everything was fine, because our monthly video calls showed a smiling Sarah who always said things were great, Dad, just great. The masks we wear for the people we love. Sarah had maintained hers, even across continents, and computer screens protecting me from a truth that would have brought me home on the next flight. But I was home now, and it was time to understand the full scope of what my daughter was facing before I made my next move. I spent the next 3 days conducting surveillance that would have impressed my old military buddies from the Army Corps of Engineers. My rental car became a mobile command center, as I documented Sarah's brutal daily routine. She left the house at 5 every morning for her cleaning job. Downtown, returned at 8 to cook and clean for the Hamiltons, then departed again at 2 for a second shift at Save Mart grocery store that lasted until 10 at night. 17-hour days, 7 days a week. Through my binoculars, I watched Robert spend his days in pajamas, playing video games and drinking imported beer, while Sarah scrubbed floors around him. Patricia Hamilton treated my daughter like something scraped off her shoe-barking orders from various lounging positions throughout the house Eleanor and I had chosen so carefully for its sunny rooms and garden views. On the 3rd night of my surveillance, I witnessed something that nearly broke my carefully maintained control. Through the dining room window, I watched Robert explode at Sarah for buying the wrong brand of beer. His face contorted with rage as he threw the 6-pack against the wall. Sarah immediately dropped to her knees to clean up the mess and broken glass, while Robert continued screaming about her stupidity, her worthlessness, her inability to do anything right. Then, Patricia joined in, actually throwing a ceramic plate that shattered inches from Sarah's head. "You useless creature," the older woman shrieked. "Can't even shop properly. What good are you?" Sarah just kept cleaning, apologizing repeatedly, her movements automatic, like someone who had endured this treatment so many times it had become routine. When she stood, I saw her palm was bleeding from the broken glass, but she just wrapped it in a dish towel and continued clearing the table while the Hamiltons stormed off to different rooms. I had to grip my steering wheel until my knuckles went white to stop myself from charging into that house. But I needed more than righteous anger. I needed leverage. Tom Jacobson's full report arrived the next day, and it painted an even darker picture. Through his banking connections, Tom discovered that Sarah's accounts had been systematically drained. Her paychecks from both jobs went directly into Robert's account. The $500,000 in life insurance Eleanor had left specifically for Sarah had vanished into Robert's failed business ventures and gambling debts. "He owes money to some dangerous people," Tom explained over coffee at a diner far from Sarah's neighborhood. "We're talking organized crime, dangerous. The kind of people who break legs for missed payments. So he's keeping Sarah around as a source of income. It's more calculated than that. Tom slid a folder across the table. Robert filed for divorce twice in 2018 and 2020. Both times he withdrew the filing at the last minute. My legal consultant says if they divorced, the house would likely revert to Sarah as a premarital asset. Oregon law is pretty clear on that. The picture was becoming clearer. Robert needed Sarah alive, married, and broken enough to never fight back. She was his meal ticket, his roof over his head, his protection from creditors. But Tom had saved the most shocking revelation for last. I was having coffee with my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Sweet old lady, been living on that street for 40 years. She mentioned seeing Sarah at the pharmacy last month. Stanley, your daughter is pregnant. About 3 months along, according to Mrs. Chen's experienced eye. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Pregnant. Sarah was pregnant while being abused, overworked, and living as a slave in her own home. A grandchild I didn't even know about growing inside a woman whose body was already bearing the marks of violence. There's no record of prenatal care, Tom continued quietly. She's hiding the pregnancy. The Hamiltons don't know. Of course she was hiding it. The moment Robert and Patricia discovered Sarah was pregnant, she would lose whatever tiny leverage her earning capacity gave her. Or worse, they might see an opportunity to escalate their abuse to finally push her over an edge they'd been walking her toward for years. I paid for our coffee and the broken cup, my mind racing through possibilities. Tom had one more piece of information, something he'd saved for the end, because he knew it would change everything. Patricia Hamilton isn't just a nasty mother-in-law, he said as we walked to our cars. I had a buddy run her through the system. She was investigated for elder abuse in California 10 years ago. Her first husband died under suspicious circumstances. Fell down the stairs after changing his will to leave everything to her. The investigation was dropped due to lack of evidence, but the detective's notes, they paint a picture of a woman who knows how to make accidents happen. I stared at Tom, the implications washing over me like ice water. You're telling me my daughter is living with a possible murderer? I'm telling you to be very careful how you proceed. Patricia Hamilton has gotten away with this before. She's patient, methodical, and according to my research, she's been grooming Robert since childhood to be just as ruthless. Whatever you're planning, Stanley, don't underestimate them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my hotel window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about Sarah at 3 months pregnant, hiding morning sickness while serving breakfast to her abusers, cleaning office buildings before dawn, standing on her feet at a grocery store until 10 at night. How much longer could her body take this punishment? How much longer before Patricia Hamilton decided that a broken Sarah had outlived her usefulness? I thought about Eleanor, how she would have stormed that house like an avenging angel the moment she saw our daughter on her knees. But Eleanor had always been the passionate one, the one who acted on instinct and emotion. I was the engineer, the planner, the one who measured twice and cut once. And right now, Sarah needed the engineer, not the angry father. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Just learned Patricia recently increased Sarah's life insurance policy. Robert is the beneficiary. Policy matures in 2 months. 2 months. They were giving my pregnant daughter 2 months to live. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Patricia Hamilton was planning another accident, and she was using her weak-willed son as the perfect alibi. Who would suspect a grieving husband of killing his pregnant wife? Especially when he had such a devoted mother to comfort him through his loss and help him manage that insurance money. I sat down at the hotel desk and began making a list. If I was going to save Sarah, I needed allies' evidence and a plan that would not only extract her from this nightmare, but ensure the Hamiltons could never hurt her again. The engineer in me began calculating angles, assessing resources, identifying weaknesses in their system. Patricia Hamilton thought she had found the perfect victim in my daughter, someone isolated, broken, and without support. She was about to learn that Sarah Morrison Hamilton was not alone. Her father was home, and I had spent 10 years in the Middle East, learning how to navigate complex situations where one wrong move could be fatal. The Hamiltons had made a crucial error. They had created a situation so obviously abusive that once exposed, no jury in the world would side with them. All I needed was the right moment, the right evidence, and the right witnesses. And I was going to make sure I had all three before I made my move. The liquidation of my offshore investments took 72 hours and several heated phone conversations with financial advisors who couldn't understand why I needed $3 million in readily available funds. I didn't explain. Some battles require ammunition that can't be measured in legal briefs or moral high ground alone. Money talks, and I intended to make it scream. James Morrison was not actually my relation despite sharing a surname. He was, however, the most ruthless financial fraud attorney on the West Coast. We'd met 15 years ago when he saved Portland General Electric from a hostile takeover. Now, I sat in his downtown office laying out what I'd discovered about my daughter's situation. "This is delicate," James said after reviewing Tom Jacobson's report. "The power of attorney complicates things. If Sarah signed it during a period of mental distress, we might be able to challenge it, but that requires her cooperation. She's too scared to cooperate. They've broken her down completely. Then, we need to build a case that doesn't require her initial participation. Financial fraud, forgery, domestic abuse. These people have given us plenty to work with. But Stanley, I need you to understand something. The moment we move, they might escalate. We need Sarah protected before we show our hand." James assigned his best investigative team to the case. Within days, they uncovered a goldmine of criminal activity. Robert had forged Sarah's signature on multiple documents, including a second mortgage on the house that he'd used to pay gambling debts. The notary who had verified these signatures was a known associate of Patricia's from her California days, suggesting a long-running conspiracy. "This is RICO territory," James said, excitement creeping into his professional demeanor. "Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. We're not just looking at civil charges here. This is federal prison time." While James built the legal case, I worked on something equally important: allies. Sarah had been systematically isolated, but she'd had friends once, people who cared about her. I started with her law school study group. Jennifer Walsh was now a successful corporate attorney in Seattle. When I explained the situation over a secure video call, she broke down crying. "We tried so hard to stay in touch with Sarah. She kept canceling plans, making excuses. Eventually, Robert told us she didn't want to associate with us anymore, that we were holding her back. We should have pushed harder." Marcus Stone, working for the Justice Department in Sacramento, had a similar story. "Robert intercepted our emails, blocked our numbers. He told Sarah we were trying to sabotage her marriage because we were jealous. Classic abuser tactics. I should have recognized it." Diana Reeves was the angriest. Now a prosecutor in Portland, she had actually tried to investigate when Sarah left Preston Marlowe and Associates. The firm wouldn't cooperate without Sarah's consent, said it was a personnel matter. I knew something was wrong when she wouldn't return my calls. All three agreed to help. We needed someone on the inside, someone who could reach Sarah without arousing suspicion. Diana, being local and female, was our best option. The medical documentation was crucial, but tricky to obtain. I reached out to Dr. Lisa Thompson, whose husband had worked with me at Portland General. Lisa was now head of emergency medicine at Portland General Hospital. She reviewed the photos Tom had taken during surveillance and confirmed what we suspected. "These injury patterns are textbook domestic abuse," she said grimly. "The bruising on her arms shows defensive wounds. Someone's been grabbing her forcefully repeatedly. And see this scarring on her neck. That's from repeated trauma to the same area. Your daughter is lucky to be alive. Can you help us document this properly?" Lisa thought for a moment. "I can't approach her directly without cause. But if she happened to have a medical emergency while I was on shift, or if I happened to encounter her somewhere and she appeared to need assistance." We arranged for Lisa to shop at Save Mart during Sarah's shift. The accidental encounter went perfectly. Sarah nearly fainted while stocking shelves, a combination of exhaustion, pregnancy, and malnutrition. Lisa insisted on examining her in the break room, documenting injuries while appearing to check her vitals. She also managed to confirm the pregnancy and slip Sarah prenatal vitamins disguised as energy supplements. 13 weeks pregnant, Lisa reported. Malnourished, anemic, multiple contusions in various stages of healing. I've seen trafficking victims in better condition. The revelation that made everything click into place came from an unexpected source. Patricia Hamilton's nephew in California, facing drug charges, offered information in exchange for leniency. According to him, Patricia had been planning this for years. She had researched Sarah extensively before encouraging Robert to pursue her. Aunt Pat called her the perfect mark, the nephew told investigators. Rich parents, one dead, one overseas. No siblings, soft-hearted. She said it would be like taking candy from a baby. But Patricia had made one miscalculation. She assumed I would stay away content with video calls and holiday cards. She assumed a father who would leave for 10 years wouldn't come back. She was wrong. The final piece of preparation involved creating leverage against Robert himself. If Patricia was the mastermind, Robert was the weak link. His gambling debts had reached dangerous levels. Tom Jacobson's connections revealed he owed over $200,000 to an organization run by Viktor Kozlov, people who had already broken one of Robert's fingers as a warning. I made a decision that Eleanor would have hated, but understood. I reached out to Kozlov through intermediaries offering to buy Robert's debt at a premium. Kozlov, a businessman above all, agreed. Suddenly, I held Robert's markers, though he didn't know it yet. When the time came, this would be crucial leverage. The surveillance equipment was military-grade, purchased through contacts from my Army days. Tiny cameras, virtually undetectable, soon dotted Sarah's house inside and out. Audio recorders captured every conversation. Within a week, we had enough evidence to put both Hamiltons away for years. But it was what we recorded on the 10th day that changed our timeline dramatically. Patricia, unaware of our surveillance, had a phone conversation with someone about increasing Sarah's life insurance again, and discussed making it look natural after the baby was born. Postpartum depression, she said coldly. Happens all the time. No one questions it when new mothers have accidents. My blood turned to ice. They weren't planning to wait 2 months. They were going to kill Sarah after she gave birth. Probably make it look like suicide. A depressed new mother, a tragic accident, a grieving family collecting insurance money. It was diabolical in its simplicity. James Morrison agreed we needed to accelerate our timeline. We have enough to bury them, but we need Sarah out of that house before she has the baby. I have an idea, I said, but it's going to require Oscar-worthy acting on my part. What did you have in mind? I smiled grimly. Patricia Hamilton thinks she's the only one who can play a long game. She's about to meet William Garrett, Texas oilman, and potential savior to her son's financial problems. And William Garrett is very interested in making Robert Hamilton rich again. The trap was set. Now I just needed to bait it with something the Hamiltons couldn't resist: easy money from a gullible old fool. They had no idea that this particular old fool had spent a decade negotiating with some of the sharpest minds in international business. Robert Hamilton, with his failed hedge fund and mountain of debt, was about to be played like a fiddle. And while he danced to my tune, I would be orchestrating Sarah's liberation with the precision of a military operation. The Hamiltons thought they were predators. They were about to discover they were actually prey. William Garrett was born in the parking lot of the Benson Hotel. I studied myself in the rearview mirror, adjusting the silver mustache and tinted glasses that transformed my appearance. The expensive cowboy boots and custom-tailored Western suit completed the image. Stanley Morrison, petroleum engineer, vanished beneath the facade of a Texas oil millionaire looking for West Coast investments. Robert Hamilton frequented the Multnomah Athletic Club every Tuesday and Thursday, maintaining appearances despite being 3 months behind on his membership fees. According to Tom's surveillance, He spent these visits desperately networking, trying to find any angle to restore his former status. Today, he would think he'd hit the jackpot. I positioned myself at the bar, speaking loudly enough to be overheard as I talked on my phone. No, damn it. I said 20 million, not 12. These Portland folks don't understand Texas-sized deals. I made a show of ending the call in frustration, then ordered a whiskey with an exaggerated sigh. Robert took the bait within minutes. "Trouble with the locals?" he asked, sliding onto the adjacent bar stool with practiced ease. "You could say that," I replied, affecting a drawl thicker than Houston humidity. "William Garrett just flew in from Dallas, looking to diversify into Pacific Northwest real estate. But these lawyers and financial advisors here are more interested in regulations than returns." I watched Robert's pupils dilate at the mention of money. "Robert Hamilton. I might be able to help. I ran an investment firm here for years. I know everyone worth knowing in Portland finance." "That's so." I studied him over my whiskey glass. He looked smaller in person than through surveillance photos. Soft, weak. This was the man who'd been terrorizing my daughter. I prefer working with someone who understands that sometimes the best deals happen outside traditional channels, if you catch my meaning. Robert's smile turned predatory. "I catch it perfectly, Mr. Garrett. Why don't we continue this conversation over lunch? My treat." I let him pay with a credit card I knew was nearly maxed out, watching him sweat when it took an extra moment to process. Over overpriced steaks, I spun tales of oil leases and offshore accounts, dropping hints about needing someone discreet to handle sensitive investments. "The thing is," I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially, "I've got 20 million in cash that needs to be relocated. Legally, of course, but quietly. The ex-wife has lawyers sniffing around my assets. You understand?" Robert practically salivated. "Completely understand. Confidentiality is paramount in these situations. I've handled similar relocations for select clients." We arranged to meet again in 3 days. I needed him hungry, but not suspicious. As we parted, I mentioned casually, "I'm staying at the Heathman penthouse suite. Don't like being too accessible, if you know what I mean." The Heathman penthouse cost more per night than Sarah made in a month, at both her jobs combined. But it was necessary for the illusion. Robert needed to believe William Garrett had money to burn. While I was playing millionaire, Diana Reeves was executing her part of the plan. She accidentally encountered Sarah at Save Mart during the afternoon shift. The meeting was carefully orchestrated to happen in the stockroom, away from cameras and customers. Sarah. Oh my God, Sarah Morrison. Diana's shock was only partially feigned. Seeing our brilliant friend stocking toilet paper with bruised arms was genuinely horrifying. Sarah's reaction broke Diana's heart. She literally cowered, trying to hide behind a cart. "Diana, I can't talk, I'm working." "Just 2 minutes, please. We've been so worried about you." The conversation was brief, but crucial. Diana managed to slip Sarah a burner phone hidden inside a box of tampons. "If you ever need help anytime, day or night, we're here. Me, Jennifer Marcus. We never stopped caring about you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I can't. You don't understand. It's complicated." "It doesn't have to be," Diana whispered urgently. "Whatever's happening, we can help. You're not alone." Sarah took the phone, hands trembling. For a moment, Diana saw a flash of the woman Sarah used to be, brilliant and determined. Then it vanished, replaced by fear. "If he finds this..." "He won't. It's programmed to silent. Hidden number. Just keep it safe, please." Their interaction was interrupted by the store manager calling for Sarah. Diana watched her friend hurry away, noting how she moved like someone expecting to be struck at any moment. The burner phone was hidden in Sarah's apron pocket, a lifeline she didn't know she'd desperately need within hours. That evening, our surveillance captured a conversation that changed everything. Patricia was in Sarah's kitchen, having discovered a receipt for prenatal vitamins in the trash. She confronted Sarah while Robert was out drinking with friends. "You little whore! Patricia hissed, backing Sarah against the refrigerator. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "I knew it. Trying to trap my son with another brat. Well, it won't work." Patricia picked up a kitchen knife, examining it casually. "You know pregnant women have accidents all the time. Slip in the shower, fall downstairs. So tragic." "Please," Sarah whispered. "I'll leave. I'll sign whatever you want. Just let me go." Patricia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Leave you? Think you get to leave? You owe us everything. This house, the food you eat, the air you breathe. No, you'll stay right here until I decide what to do with you. And if you tell Robert about this conversation, or about the baby—" She pressed the knife point against Sarah's stomach, not hard enough to cut, but enough to threaten. Accidents happen so quickly. I listened to this recording in my hotel room, my hands shaking with rage. James Morrison on speakerphone was equally appalled. That's attempted assault with a deadly weapon. Terroristic threats. We need to extract Sarah now. Not yet, I forced myself to say calmly. If we move now, Patricia might claim it was taken out of context. We need her to fully incriminate herself. Stanley, she just threatened your pregnant daughter with a knife. And tomorrow, she's going to do something worse. Trust me. The next morning, Dr. Lisa Thompson received an anonymous tip about a medical emergency at Sarah's address. She arranged to be the responding physician, arriving with a full ambulance crew just as Sarah was serving breakfast. "Ma'am, we received a call about someone experiencing severe abdominal pain," Lisa announced, pushing past a startled Robert. "No one called," Patricia said coldly. "You have the wrong house." Lisa's trained eye found Sarah, immediately noting her pallor and the way she held her midsection. "Ma'am, are you experiencing any discomfort? You look unwell." "She's fine," Robert interjected, but Lisa was already moving towards Sarah with professional determination. "I'm a doctor and I can see she's not fine. Ma'am, when did you last eat a proper meal?" Sarah looked between the furious Hamiltons and the concerned doctor. Yesterday, I think." "You think, sir? Is this your wife? Are you aware she appears to be suffering from malnutrition?" The beauty of Lisa's approach was its official nature. With uniformed EMTs as witnesses, the Hamiltons couldn't simply throw her out. She managed a basic examination right there in the kitchen, documenting everything. "This woman needs immediate medical attention," Lisa announced. "She's dangerously underweight, showing signs of anemia and—" She paused for effect. "Pregnant. Did you know your wife was pregnant, Mr. Hamilton?" Robert's face went through several expressions before settling on manufactured surprise. "Pregnant, Sarah, is this true?" But Patricia's reaction was more telling. Pure, cold fury flashed across her face before she schooled her features. The EMTs caught it all, and more importantly, so did our cameras. "I'm fine," Sarah said, weakly, well-trained in her responses. "Just tired." Lisa played her final card. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist you come with us for observation. Your condition could pose a risk to your baby." "She's not going anywhere." Patricia stepped forward. "This is our home. You can't just barge in here and take people." "Actually, I can," Lisa replied coolly. "Under Oregon law, if I believe a patient is in immediate medical danger and possibly being prevented from seeking care, I can authorize emergency transport. Now, are you going to let this woman receive medical attention, or do I need to call the police?" It was checkmate. To refuse would invite scrutiny they couldn't afford. Robert quickly agreed Sarah should be examined, playing the concerned husband. "Of course, honey. You should go. We had no idea you were feeling so poorly." As the EMTs helped Sarah to the ambulance, she suddenly swayed and reached for her pocket. The burner phone fell out, clattering on the floor. Patricia's eyes locked onto it like a hawk spotting prey. "What's that?" she demanded. My phone," Sarah stammered. "That's not your phone. Your phone is silver." Patricia bent to retrieve it, but Lisa was faster. "I'll hold on to this for her," the doctor said smoothly, pocketing the device. Patients often lose personal items during transport. The ride to the hospital gave Diana Reeves time to reach the emergency room. As Sarah's emergency contact mysteriously appeared in the hospital system, Diana was called to her bedside. The reunion was tearful, but necessarily brief. "They know about the baby now," Diana whispered while nurses bustled around. "This changes everything. You're not safe there anymore." "I can't leave." Sarah's conditioning was heartbreakingly complete. "They'll find me. Robert said if I ever tried to run, he'd make sure I never saw my baby. He has connections everywhere." "Sarah, listen to me. We have help. More than you know. But you need to be strong for just a little longer. Can you do that?" Sarah's hand moved protectively to her stomach. For the first time in years, Diana saw steel in her friend's eyes. "For my baby, I'll do anything." "Good. Because tomorrow everything changes. When you go back to that house, pretend nothing's different. But be ready. When we come for you, we're going to come fast." The hospital released Sarah after 6 hours of IV fluids and observation. Robert picked her up, playing the devoted husband for the staff. But our surveillance showed the real reception when they returned home. Patricia was waiting in the living room. The kitchen knife from the night before laid casually on the coffee table. "So, a baby. How wonderful. Robert, did you know your wife was keeping secrets?" "Mother, please. This is good news." Robert's attempt at peacekeeping was pathetic. "Good news." Patricia stood slowly. "Your wife has been lying to us for months, hiding her condition while taking our charity. And this," she produced Sarah's work phone from her pocket. "I found 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. She's been in contact with someone." "Those are from work," Sarah said quickly. Too quickly. Patricia smiled, and it was the smile of a predator certain of its kill. "Well then, since you're feeling well enough to lie, you're well enough to work. The bathrooms need cleaning. All of them. And Sarah, I'll be watching. Every move you make. Every call. Every breath. You're not as clever as you think you are." Listening to this through our surveillance feed, I knew we were out of time. Patricia was escalating, becoming more dangerous, as she felt her control slipping. Tomorrow, Robert would meet with William Garrett to discuss a $20 million investment opportunity. While he was gone, Patricia would be alone with Sarah. It was time to end this charade. But first, I needed Patricia to fully reveal herself, to confess her crimes in a way that would leave no doubt in any jury's mind. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. The trap was baited. Tomorrow, the predators would become prey. And my daughter would finally be free. Patricia Hamilton's attempt to poison my daughter began at 7:23 in the morning. I watched through our surveillance feed as she stirred something into Sarah's oatmeal, while my daughter cleaned the guest bathroom upstairs. The substance came from a small vial Patricia had hidden behind the flour canister. Rat poison, according to the label Tom Jacobson's team had photographed during a previous reconnaissance. I immediately called Dr. Lisa Thompson, who was already in position. "Code red. She's actually doing it." "On my way, 10 minutes. Those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. I watched Sarah descend the stairs, exhausted from another sleepless night, moving toward the poisoned breakfast that would kill both her and my unborn grandchild. Patricia smiled maternally, pushing the bowl forward. "Eat up, dear. You need your strength. For the baby." Sarah reached for the spoon. I gripped my phone, ready to call 911, ready to blow our entire operation if necessary. Then the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Patricia snapped, irritated by the interruption. Dr. Lisa Thompson stood on the porch in full medical professional attire, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Thompson from Portland General. I'm conducting follow-up visits for pregnant patients who were treated in our emergency department yesterday." "She's fine. Goodbye." Patricia tried to close the door, but Lisa had already stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm required by state law to perform these welfare checks. Refusing access could be considered medical neglect, especially given your daughter-in-law's condition yesterday." Patricia's jaw clenched, but she stepped aside. Lisa entered purposefully, heading straight for the kitchen where Sarah sat with the untouched bowl before her. "Mrs. Hamilton, how are you feeling this morning? Have you eaten yet?" "I was just about to—" Lisa's trained eye swept the scene, noting Patricia's tense posture and the single bowl of oatmeal. "Actually, before you eat, I need to check your blood sugar. The readings yesterday were concerning." She, accidentally, knocked the bowl while reaching for her medical bag, sending poisoned oatmeal splattering across the floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry. How clumsy of me." "You stupid woman!" Patricia exploded, then caught herself. "I mean, accidents happen. Sarah, clean this up." No, I'll handle it," Lisa insisted, already pulling paper towels from the counter. As she cleaned, she managed to preserve samples in small vials she palmed expertly. "Mrs. Hamilton, you really should be off your feet more. Let me make you something else. Toast, perhaps dry foods are better for morning sickness anyway." Patricia watched with barely concealed fury as Lisa commandeered her kitchen, preparing safe food for Sarah while conducting her examination. Every attempt Patricia made to regain control was deflected with medical jargon and cheerful efficiency. "Your blood pressure is elevated," Lisa announced after checking Sarah's vitals. "I'm prescribing immediate bed rest for the remainder of the day. No housework, no standing for long periods." She turned to Patricia. "I trust you'll ensure she follows these instructions for the baby's sake." Patricia's smile was arctic. "Of course, doctor. We want what's best for Sarah and the baby." After Lisa left, having successfully prevented a murder and gathered evidence, Patricia's mask slipped completely. She grabbed Sarah's arm hard enough to leave new bruises. "You think you're clever, don't you? Having your doctor friend check up on you." She leaned close, breath hot with rage. "This changes nothing. You're still mine. And that baby. We'll see how long it lasts when Daddy's in prison." "Prison," Sarah whispered. Patricia laughed. "Oh, yes. Your precious Robert has been very naughty with his business dealings. The FBI could receive some very interesting documents about his hedge fund. Anonymous tips are so helpful, aren't they? So you'll behave, or your baby grows up visiting Daddy in federal prison." This confession, captured crystal clear on our surveillance, was gold. Patricia had just admitted to knowledge of Robert's crimes and threatened to use them for blackmail. Combined with the attempted poisoning, we had enough to put her away for decades. Meanwhile, across town at the Multnomah Athletic Club, I was playing William Garrett one last time. Robert arrived 15 minutes early, desperation radiating from every pore. He dressed in his best remaining suit, the one with the carefully hidden frayed cuffs. "Billy." He'd taken to calling me Billy, thinking it indicated our growing friendship. "Good to see you, partner." I let him see the briefcase first. Black leather, expensive, with gold clasps that caught the light. His eyes fixed on it like a starving man spotting bread. "Brought a little good faith money." I drawled, patting the case. "Like to see how a man handles the small amounts before trusting him with the big ones." We sat in a private dining room I'd reserved. I opened the briefcase, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. $100,000 in cash, enough to make Robert's pupils dilate and hands tremble. "This here's just a taste," I said, pushing the case slightly toward him. "The $20 million is sitting in accounts ready to move. But I need to know you're the right man for the job." "I'm absolutely the right man." Robert leaned forward eagerly. "What do you need me to do?" I pulled out documents James Morrison had prepared. They looked like complex financial instruments, but were actually carefully crafted confessions. "Just need you to sign some paperwork. Confidentiality agreements, partnership structures, standard stuff." Robert barely glanced at the papers before signing. If he had read carefully, he would have noticed he was admitting to embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. But the cash was 2 feet away, and Robert Hamilton had never been good at thinking beyond immediate gratification. "There's one more thing," I said as he signed the last page. "I like to know my partners inside and out. Tell me about your family. Your wife. Sarah, isn't it?" Robert's expression soured. What about her? Well, a man's wife can be an asset or a liability in business. Which is yours? The cash loosened his tongue remarkably. Honestly, she's become more trouble than she's worth. Wasn't always that way. When I married her, she was this brilliant lawyer, beautiful rich parents, the perfect package. What changed? Robert helped himself to the whiskey I'd ordered. Life, I guess. My business had some setbacks. She couldn't handle the pressure, became clingy needy, depression issues. Now she's pregnant, which is just another complication I don't need. Pregnant women can be inconvenient. I agreed, my voice neutral, while my hands itched to throttle him. You have no idea. Mother thinks. He caught himself. Your mother lives with you. She's been helping us through this difficult time. She's got experience with these situations. Her first husband had similar issues with depression. Tragic how that ended. I leaned back, affecting casual interest. How did it end? Robert studied his whiskey. Accident. Fell down the stairs. Mother was devastated, of course. She'd been trying so hard to help him. He met my eyes with a look that said he knew exactly what kind of accident it had been. And you think your wife might have a similar accident? I think, Robert said carefully, that sometimes people who are suffering need to be released from their pain. And if that release comes with financial benefits for those left behind, well, that's just God's way of providing for the faithful. I had him, on tape, discussing his mother's murder of her first husband, and implying Sarah might meet the same fate. Combined with Patricia's recorded threats and the attempted poisoning, we had conspiracy to commit murder. Well, Robert, I pushed the briefcase fully across the table. I think we're going to do great business together. Why don't you take this as a down payment? There's plenty more where that came from. His hands actually shook as he closed the briefcase. Thank you, Billy. You won't regret this. I'm sure I won't. One thing, though. I'd like to meet this mother of yours. Any woman who raised a smart businessman like you must be quite something. She is. Robert's smile was genuine for once. How about tomorrow evening you could come for dinner? See the family operation. I'll bring my lawyer, I said. Like to have everything official when I make the big transfer. Of course, whatever you need. As Robert left with the briefcase already planning how to spend money that would never truly be his, I felt the pieces clicking into place. Tomorrow evening, all the major players would be in one room. Sarah would have witnesses to whatever came next, and Patricia Hamilton would finally face justice for her crimes. But first, I needed to ensure my daughter survived the next 24 hours. Patricia was escalating, becoming more desperate and dangerous. The poisoning attempt showed she was ready to act. We needed contingencies in place. I called James Morrison. Contact Detective Raymond Carter. Tell him to have units ready tomorrow night. We're going to give him Patricia Hamilton on a silver platter. And Sarah. Sarah is going to be surrounded by people who love her when the truth comes out. She's going to see her husband and mother-in-law arrested. And she's going to realize she's been fighting alone for years when she had an army ready to stand with her. That night, I couldn't eat. I stood at my hotel window, looking toward the neighborhood where my daughter was spending what I prayed was her last night in captivity. Tomorrow, the masks would come off. William Garrett would disappear, and Stanley Morrison would stand in that house where his daughter had suffered for so long. The Hamiltons thought they were predators, but they were about to learn they were simply parasites who had attached themselves to the wrong family. Tomorrow, my daughter would be free, and the Hamiltons would pay for every bruise, every tear, every moment of fear they had inflicted on her. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. The dinner was scheduled for 7 o'clock. By 6:30, 23 people had gathered at Sarah's house, though Robert and Patricia knew about only 2 of them. The Hamiltons had spent the day preparing for William Garrett and his lawyer, unaware that their home had become a stage for their own downfall. I sat in a van parked down the street, watching through surveillance feeds, as Sarah served appetizers to Robert's extended family. Patricia had invited them to impress the Texas millionaire, wanting witnesses to her son's business acumen. She had no idea she was assembling an audience for her own destruction. Robert's uncle, Judge Theodore Hamilton, had driven up from Salem. His cousins from Seattle made the trip along with Patricia's sister from Tacoma. They filled the living room with small talk and wine, blissfully unaware they were extras in a production years in the making. Detective Raymond Carter sat beside me in the van, reviewing the evidence one final time. "This is enough to bury them both," he said, holding transcripts of Patricia's murder confession and the poisoning attempt. "But are you sure you want to do it this way? We could arrest them quietly, spare Sarah the spectacle." "Sarah needs to see this," I replied. "She needs to see them expose their masks ripped off in front of everyone. She needs to know she wasn't crazy, wasn't weak. She was surviving monsters." At 6:50, James Morrison pulled up in his Mercedes. He would enter first as William Garrett's lawyer, maintaining the fiction a few minutes longer. Diana Reeves, Jennifer Walsh, and Marcus Stone waited in another car, ready for their cue. Dr. Lisa Thompson was positioned in the emergency response vehicle we'd hired, prepared for any medical needs that might arise when Sarah learned the truth. At 6:55, I transformed into William Garrett one last time. The mustache, the glasses, the boots, the attitude. I would walk into that house as the fictional savior Robert thought he'd found. But I would reveal myself as something far more dangerous to the Hamiltons, a father who had discovered what they'd done to his daughter. "Remember," Detective Carter said, "I can't move until they incriminate themselves in front of witnesses or make a direct threat. We need this clean for court." I nodded and stepped out of the van. The walk to Sarah's front door felt like crossing a battlefield. Through the windows, I could see my daughter in that degrading apron, serving drinks to people sitting in her living room, in her house, while she waited on them like hired help. Robert answered the door with an eager smile. "Billy, come in, come in. Everyone, this is William Garrett, the man I told you about. He's going to make our family very wealthy." I tipped my hat to the room, noting positions. Patricia sat like a queen, holding court, dressed in an expensive gown that had probably been purchased with Sarah's money. The relatives clustered around, sensing opportunity. And there was Sarah, barely looking up, as she offered me a drink from a tray. "Thank you kindly, miss," I said, meeting her eyes for just a moment. Did she recognize something in my voice? Her brow furrowed slightly, but Patricia's sharp command sent her scurrying back to the kitchen. "Mr. Garrett." Judge Hamilton extended his hand. "Robert tells us you're in oil." "Among other things," I replied, settling into character. "Recently branched out into justice, you might say." Patricia laughed, missing the implication. "How delightful. Robert could use a partner with diverse interests. Please sit." Sarah. The good champagne. James Morrison engaged the relatives in legal small talk, while I studied the room. Family photos lined the mantel, but I noticed all recent pictures of Sarah had been removed. She'd been erased from her own home's history. "So, Billy," Robert leaned forward conspiratorially, "have you brought the partnership papers?" "Indeed I have," I said, accepting champagne from Sarah's trembling hands. "But first, I believe in transparency. Everyone here should know exactly what kind of business we're discussing." Patricia's eyes sharpened. "I thought this was a private investment matter." "Oh, it is. Private and personal." I stood, commanding the room's attention. "You see, I've been investigating the Hamilton family for quite some time. Your business practices, your personal relationships, your methods." Robert's smile faltered. "Investigating Billy. What is this?" "This," I said, pulling off the false mustache and glasses, "is Judgment Day." Sarah's gasp cut through the room. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor she'd polished so many times. "Dad?" The room erupted in confusion. Robert shot to his feet, face purpling. "What the hell is going on?" "Sit down, Robert." My voice carried the authority of righteous fury finally unleashed. "Everyone, please remain seated. What you're about to witness concerns the safety and life of Sarah Morrison Hamilton, and I need you all to pay very close attention. Judge Hamilton started to rise. This is highly irregular. What's irregular, Your Honor, is a woman being enslaved in her own home, while her husband and mother-in-law plot her murder. I pulled out a small recorder. Would you like to hear your nephew discussing the tragic accident that befell Patricia's first husband? Or should we start with this morning's attempted poisoning? Patricia went white. You're insane. Sarah, tell them this is ridiculous. But Sarah stood, frozen tears streaming down her face as the truth of my presence sank in. Diana Reeves chose that moment to enter, followed by Jennifer and Marcus. We're here, Sarah, just like we promised. What is this? Robert snarled, but his bravado was cracking. You people are trespassing. Actually, James Morrison interjected smoothly. I'm here in my capacity as an attorney, representing Stanley Morrison and Sarah Morrison Hamilton. I have documents proving systematic financial fraud, domestic abuse, and attempted murder. I played the first recording Patricia, threatening Sarah and the baby with the kitchen knife. The room listened in horrified silence to Patricia's cold voice, discussing how accidents happen to pregnant women. Robert's relatives unconsciously leaned away from Patricia as her words filled the room. That's taken out of context, Patricia stammered. Context. I switched to the poisoning video. The surveillance footage, enhanced and clear, showed Patricia stirring rat poison into Sarah's breakfast. What context justifies poisoning a pregnant woman? Judge Hamilton stood abruptly. Patricia, what have you done? Nothing. It's fabricated deepfakes. But her hands shook as she spoke. Should we discuss your first husband, Patricia? I played the next recording, Robert casually admitting his mother had murdered before would murder again. Your own son knows what you are. Robert tried to run. Detective Carter and 4 uniformed officers entered precisely as Robert reached the door. Robert Hamilton, Patricia Hamilton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, financial fraud. No. Patricia lunged not for the door, but for Sarah, fingers curved like claws. This is your fault, you worthless. She never reached my daughter. I intercepted her with prejudice that would have made my Army combatives instructor proud, pinning her to the ground while she shrieked obscenities. You will never touch my daughter again. The scene exploded into chaos. Robert's relatives shouted questions. Patricia spat venom as officers cuffed her. Robert blubbered about misunderstandings and setups. Through it all, Sarah stood perfectly still, as if afraid moving would shatter the reality of her rescue. Dr. Lisa Thompson entered with her medical team. Sarah, honey, you're safe now. Let me check you over. Make sure you and the baby are okay. The baby, Sarah whispered, hand moving to her stomach. They were going to kill my baby. They're never going to hurt you again, Diana promised, wrapping Sarah in a protective embrace. Never. As the police led the Hamiltons away, I played one final recording for the stunned relatives. It was Robert from our lunch, discussing how Sarah had become more trouble than she's worth, how death would be a release that came with financial benefits. Judge Hamilton sank into a chair, face gray. My God, we had no idea. Sarah, we're so sorry. We should have seen. You should have, I agreed coldly. Every one of you saw bruises, heard excuses, watched Sarah serve you in her own home while they treated her like property. But you saw what was comfortable to see. Robert's cousin from Seattle started crying. We thought she was just shy. Patricia said Sarah preferred staying busy. Patricia said a lot of things. I moved to my daughter, who finally focused on my face. Sarah, sweetheart, I'm here. Dad's here. She collapsed into my arms, 5 years of suppressed fear and pain releasing in wrenching sobs. I thought you didn't know. I tried so hard to hide it. I didn't want you to worry. I know, baby, I know. But it's over now, you're safe. The rest happened in fragments. Police photographed evidence. Robert's relatives gave statements, several admitting they'd noticed troubling signs, but hadn't wanted to interfere. Patricia's sister revealed her own suspicions about the first husband's death, suspicions she'd buried out of family loyalty. Through it all, I held my daughter, while her friends formed a protective circle around us. Marcus had already begun documenting everything for the civil suits that would follow. Jennifer was on the phone with Preston Marlowe and associates explaining why they needed to hold Sarah's position open. Diana coordinated with Detective Carter, ensuring every piece of evidence was properly handled. Mr. Morrison. Judge Hamilton approached hesitantly. I want you to know, I'll be recusing myself from any cases related to this matter. But personally, I'll ensure Robert and Patricia face the full weight of justice. What they did to your daughter is unconscionable. I met his eyes over Sarah's head. What's unconscionable is how long it went on while good people did nothing. Don't fail another victim, Your Honor. As the house emptied of police and witnesses, Sarah's friends helped her to the couch. Dr. Thompson conducted a gentle examination, confirming both Sarah and the baby were stable despite the stress. You're 14 weeks along, she told Sarah with a smile. Would you like to know the gender? Sarah looked at me, then nodded. Yes. It's a girl. A perfectly healthy baby girl. Fresh tears came, but these were different. These were tears of hope. A girl. Dad, I'm having a girl. And she's going to grow up strong and free. I promised. Just like her mother. The house felt different with the Hamiltons gone. Their oppressive presence had been exorcised, but Sarah still moved carefully, as if expecting punishment. It would take time, I knew. Recovery isn't instant. But she was free, and that was the foundation everything else would build upon. As we prepared to leave for the hotel suite I'd booked for Sarah, she paused in the doorway of what had been her prison. The house needs to be cleaned, she said automatically. No, Diana said firmly. It needs to be reclaimed, but that's tomorrow's job. Tonight you rest. You're safe. You're loved. You're free. Sarah looked back once more, then stepped into the night air. For the first time in years, she walked out of that house not as a servant, but as its owner. The woman who had entered that home broken and enslaved was beginning the journey back to who she'd always been meant to be. The trap had been sprung, the predators were caged, and my daughter was finally truly coming home. The courtroom was packed 3 months later, when Patricia Hamilton received her life sentence. She'd aged 20 years since her arrest, the careful mask of refinement replaced by the harsh reality of what she truly was, a calculating killer who'd murdered one husband and tried to murder her daughter-in-law and unborn grandchild. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours. Robert's sentencing came a week later. 15 years for fraud, conspiracy, domestic violence, and a host of financial crimes that had surfaced during the investigation. He'd tried to cut a deal offering to testify against his mother, but the evidence was so overwhelming prosecutors didn't need his cooperation. I watched him shuffle away in chains, wondering how someone so weak had managed to terrorize my daughter for so long. The answer, of course, was Patricia. She'd crafted him into a weapon aimed at vulnerable women with assets to steal. Sarah sat beside me, through both trials, growing stronger each day. The first weeks after the arrests had been the hardest. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning, panicked about being late for her cleaning job. She'd apologize constantly for things that needed no apology. She'd flinch when anyone moved too quickly. But with therapy, love, and time, the real Sarah began re-emerging. The financial restoration happened swiftly. James Morrison's team voided every fraudulent document, restored Sarah's sole ownership of the house, and recovered nearly $300,000 from various accounts Robert had hidden. The life insurance policies in Robert's name were canceled. The second mortgage was eliminated. Several of Robert's victims from his hedge fund fraud came forward, and Sarah's testimony helped them recover their investments. Preston Marlowe and Associates didn't just hold Sarah's position. They offered her a partnership track with signing bonus that acknowledged the years she'd lost. Margaret Preston herself came to visit Sarah, apologizing for not pushing harder when they'd noticed the abuse signs. "We failed you," Margaret said simply. "We saw the bruises, heard the excuses, and we let professional boundaries stop us from intervening. That changes now. The firm is implementing new policies for identifying and supporting employees experiencing domestic abuse." Sarah returned to work gradually, starting with research and brief writing from home. Her legal mind, dulled by years of abuse, sharpened quickly when given real challenges instead of constant criticism. Within 2 months, she was back in court, arguing cases with the brilliant intensity that had marked her early career. The house transformation became a community project. Diana, Jennifer, and Marcus organized work parties where friends, colleagues, and even some of Robert's relatives who felt genuine remorse came to help. We stripped away every trace of the Hamiltons' presence. Patricia's gaudy decorations were donated. Robert's gaming setup was sold, the proceeds going to a domestic violence shelter. Sarah's photos were restored to the mantle. The most meaningful moment came when we removed that degrading Hamilton family MAID apron. Sarah held it for a long moment, then dropped it into the fireplace. We watched it burn while she spoke quietly. "I kept telling myself it was temporary, that if I just worked hard enough, was good enough, they'd love me again. But it was never about love. It was about control." "You survived," Diana said firmly. "That took more strength than any of us can imagine." Sarah's pregnancy progressed beautifully once she had proper nutrition and prenatal care. I moved back to Portland, permanently buying a house 3 blocks away. Not to hover, but to be present in the way I hadn't been for too many years. We developed new routines: Sunday dinners, walks in the park, quiet evenings where we talked about Eleanor, and how proud she would have been to see Sarah reclaim her life. The birth came on a bright April morning. Eleanor Grace Morrison entered the world at 7 pounds 3 ounces with her mother's eyes and her grandmother's determined chin. Sarah held her daughter with wonder and fierce protectiveness. "She'll never doubt she's loved," Sarah whispered. "She'll never feel worthless or small. I promise you that, Eleanor Grace." I stood beside them, 3 generations connected by love and survival. "Your mother would be so proud," I told Sarah. "You faced down monsters and won. You protected your baby when you could barely protect yourself. You're the strongest person I know." The months that followed brought continued healing. Sarah joined a support group for domestic abuse survivors, eventually becoming a peer counselor. She used her legal expertise to help other women escape situations like hers, working pro bono with local shelters to file restraining orders and navigate divorce proceedings. The Morrison Foundation, which we established with the settlement money from various lawsuits, provided emergency funds for women fleeing abusive situations. The Eleanor Fund, named for both Sarah's mother and daughter, specifically helped pregnant women escape domestic violence. Sarah insisted on being hands-on with both organizations, transforming her pain into purpose. 2 years after that terrible night when truth shattered the Hamiltons' facade, I pushed Eleanor Grace on the swing in Sarah's backyard. The same yard where Sarah had once served her abusers now hosted barbecues for survivors, strategy sessions for legal aid lawyers, and play dates with other children whose mothers had found freedom. Sarah emerged from the house with Daniel Brooks, the pediatrician she'd started dating 6 months earlier. He'd been Eleanor Grace's doctor first, but his gentle manner and respect for boundaries had slowly earned Sarah's trust. Watching them together, I saw something I'd feared might be lost forever: Sarah's ability to love and be loved without fear. "Danny's joining us for dinner," Sarah announced, her smile genuine and unguarded. "Is that okay?" "More than okay," I assured her, noting how Daniel waited for Sarah to initiate contact, how he spoke to her with consistent respect. He understood what she'd survived and never tried to rush her healing. That evening, as we gathered around Sarah's dining table, I thought about the journey we'd traveled. From that horrific moment when I'd found my daughter on her knees, wearing a servant's apron in her own home, to this Sarah strong and free, surrounded by love, raising her own daughter with joy instead of fear. "I have something to tell you all," Sarah said as we finished dessert. She glanced at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm pregnant. Daniel and I are having a baby." The table erupted in celebration. Eleanor Grace, now talking in full sentences, declared she wanted a sister. Diana Jennifer and Marcus, who'd become regular fixtures at our family gatherings, offered congratulations and immediately began planning another transformation of the nursery. Later, as guests departed and Eleanor Grace slept upstairs, Sarah and I sat on the porch, where she'd once served Robert's relatives, while they ignored her suffering. "Do you think I'm moving too fast?" she asked. "Having another baby trusting again?" I took her hand, feeling the strength in fingers that had once shaken, while serving coffee to her abusers. "I think you're living proof that survival isn't just about escaping. It's about rebuilding, thriving, choosing love over fear. Your mother would say you're moving at exactly the right speed yours." "I still have nightmares sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I dream I'm back there, that this freedom is the dream. Dr. Chen says it may never completely go away." "But you wake up," I reminded her. "And every time you wake up, you choose to keep building this beautiful life. That's not moving too fast. That's courage." A year later, Sarah gave birth to James Daniel Brooks, a robust boy who inherited his father's calm temperament and his mother's fighting spirit. The house that had once echoed with Patricia's cruel commands now rang with children's laughter. The kitchen, where poison had been stirred into breakfast, became the heart of a home where love was the main ingredient in every meal. Patricia Hamilton died in prison 5 years into her life sentence, unrepentant to the end. Robert denied parole twice, eventually signed divorce papers from his cell. Sarah donated their wedding rings to the Morrison Foundation, where the gold was melted down and reshaped into pins for survivors' phoenixes rising from ashes. I often thought about those 10 years I spent in Dubai, chasing wealth while my daughter fought for survival. The money I'd earned had helped in the legal battles, but it could never buy back the time I'd lost. Still, Sarah never blamed me. "You couldn't have known," she always said. I became an expert at hiding the truth. The real lesson wasn't about the signs I'd missed or the years I'd been absent. It was about the power of truth, the strength of community, and the unbreakable nature of the human spirit. Sarah had survived not because I'd swept in to save her, but because she'd held on to her core self, even as the Hamiltons tried to destroy it. When given the chance, she'd chosen freedom. When offered support, she'd accepted it. When shown love, she'd learned to trust it again. 10 years after my return from Dubai, I stood in Sarah's backyard again, this time watching Eleanor Grace, now 12, practice her closing arguments for mock trial. She had her mother's legal mind and her grandmother's passion for justice. James, 8, played referee, while their youngest sibling, 3-year-old Sophia Michelle, served as the jury. Sarah and Daniel worked together in the garden. Eleanor and I had planned so many years ago. They'd married quietly, 2 years after James's birth. A small ceremony focused on promises of respect, partnership, and continued growth together. Their love wasn't the desperate passion of youth, but the steady warmth of two people who understood that real love meant choosing each other daily. Grandpa, watch. Eleanor Grace launched into her argument about why bedtime should be extended on weekends. She was brilliant, articulate, and absolutely confident in her worth. Everything her mother had been before the darkness, everything she'd fought to become again. As the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of hope, I realized this was what victory looked like. Not just the absence of abuse, but the presence of joy. Not just survival, but abundance. Not just escape, but transformation. Sarah caught my eye across the yard and smiled, that open, fearless smile I'd thought was lost forever. In that moment, I knew Eleanor was with us, proud of the daughter who'd refused to let evil win, proud of the granddaughters and grandson who would never know the weight of worthlessness, proud of the love that had ultimately proved stronger than fear. The woman who had once worn a degrading apron in her own home now wore the titles that truly mattered: mother, advocate, survivor, thriver. And as laughter filled the air where cruelty once reigned, I understood that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't punishment for the wicked, but the absolute triumph of those they tried to break. Sarah had been enslaved, but she'd claimed her freedom. She'd been silenced, but she'd found her voice. She'd been broken, but she'd rebuilt herself stronger than before. And in doing so, she'd taught us all that the human spirit, when supported by love and armed with truth, is ultimately magnificently unbreakable. As we called the children in for dinner, gathering around the table where Sarah had once served in fear, I offered a quiet prayer of gratitude. We'd walked through hell, but we'd emerged not just intact, but transformed. And that transformation, that choice to build beauty from ashes, was the greatest justice of all. The story of the Hamiltons ended with prison sentences and disgrace. But the story of Sarah Morrison Brooks was still being written, each chapter brighter than the last, each page, a testament to the power of love, over fear, of truth, over deception, of freedom, over control. And that story, I knew, would inspire generations to come. The house stood strong around us, no longer a prison, but a palace of possibility. And at its heart, a woman who'd refused to be broken, served dinner not as a maid, but as a queen in her rightfully reclaimed kingdom. The transformation was complete. The victory was absolute. And the future stretched before us, golden with promise and possibility. If you've ever known someone trapped in an abusive situation, or if you've survived one yourself, I want you to know something: freedom is possible. Healing happens. Love can bloom again after the harshest winter. Sometimes it takes an army of supporters. Sometimes it takes careful planning. Always it takes immense courage. But it is possible. What would you do if you discovered someone you loved was being abused? Would you have the patience to plan carefully, the courage to act decisively, and the love to support them through recovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity, of justice prevailing, and of the unbreakable human spirit. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that help exists, and that freedom is worth fighting for. Thank you for joining me on this journey from darkness to light. May you always have the courage to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. And may you never forget that love, truth, and justice, when combined, form an unstoppable force for good in this world. Until next time, remember, the only power abusers truly have is the silence of their victims and the indifference of witnesses. Break that silence, shatter that indifference, and watch how quickly their paper kingdoms fall.